The Book of Heaven. Volume 8. I was in my usual state. Blessed Jesus had not come. I was wondering, what is the act that pleases the Lord the most, and who can most encourage him to come? Regret of one's sins or patient submission? While I was entertaining these thoughts, he came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, the most beautiful act and one that I like the most is total abandonment in my will. Abandonment as the soul forgets that its being exists, while everything in it is divine will. Even if sorrow for her sins is commendable, it does not destroy the person's own being. But surrender completely to my will destroys the own being and leads him to regain possession of the divine being. By surrendering in my will, the soul gives me more honor because she gives me everything I can ask of the creature and it allows me to take back in me what came out of me. The soul thus comes to find the only thing it must possess, that is God, with all that he possesses. As long as it dwells totally in the will of God, the soul possesses God. If she leaves my will, she finds his personal being, with all the evils of corrupt nature. This morning, I felt like I was stopped, without being able to move forward or backward. I said to Jesus, "Lord, I can't say how I feel, but it doesn't afflict me. Whether I am last, stationary, or forward. As long as I am in your will, I am always well. Wherever I am, your will is always holy and I am always good." At that moment, blessed Jesus came and said to me, "My daughter, courage. Don't be afraid if you feel stationary. But be careful to take your breaks in my will, without leaving it in any case." I too take my breaks in her, but then, in the blink of an eye, I do more than I have done for years and years. See, for the world, it seems that I am stopped. For, since he deserves to be severely punished and I do not, it seems that I do not move. However, if I take the wand in my hand, you will see what will happen to all these stops. Ce doit être la même chose pour toi, en restant toujours dans ma volonté. Si tu vois tu te voudritter, alors arrête toi et reach hours toi dans ma volonté. Si tu vois que ma volonté veut que tu marches, alors marche en elle. Ainsi tu marcheras avec moi et tu auras la même volonté que moi. Reste continuellement dans l'ordre de ma volonté. Que tu sois arrêté ou en mouvement. Et tu seras toujours bien. J'élisis à propos d'un saint qui pense toujours à ses péchés et qui demande à Dieu le regret et le pardon pour eux. Je me disais, quelle différence entre cet saint et moi. Je ne pense jamais à mes péchés et cet saint pense toujours auxiliary scenes. Il est évident que je suis dans l'erreur. À ce moment, j'ai senti Jesus bouger en moi. Comme à travers un éclat de lumière, il me dit, Insensé, insensé. Ne veux-tu pas comprendre? Quand ma volonté est-elle produit des péchés et des imperfections? Ma volonté est toujours sainte et l'aime qui vit en elle est déjà sainte. El jour de ma volonté, en nuret, et pense à tout ce tu el conscient, même si, dans le passé, cet aime pu commettre des fautes. Parce tu el se trouvé dans la but, la sainteté et l'immensité de ma volonté. El oublie la laideur de son passé et el ne pense tu au présent. A moins tu el ne quitte ma volonté. Dans ce cas, parce tu el est revenu dans son être. Ce n'est pas surprenant tu el se souvient de ses péchés et de ses misères. Garde bien dans ton esprit que, dans ma volonté, ces pensées de péchés et de soi-même ne peuvent entrer. If the soul feels them, it means that it is not stable and well fixed in me. But let her sometimes leave me. Afterwards, I was in my usual state. I saw Jesus for a brief while. He told me, "My daughter, the truth, even if she is persecuted, it cannot help but recognize it as such. And the time comes when even the persecuted truth will be known and loved. In these sad times, everything is lies and deception, and for the truth to reign, man needs to be beaten and destroyed. Part of the punishment will come from men themselves. That will destroy each other. Other punishments will come from me. In particular for France, where there will be so many deaths that it will be almost depopulated." I thought, how bad I became. However, the Lord does not rebuke me or correct me. While I was thinking like this, I felt Jesus move in me and he said to me, "My daughter, keep moving forward, keep moving forward. If I am kindness, gentleness, and mercy, I am also justice, fortitude, and power. If I saw you regress or commit willful mistakes after all the graces I have given you, you deserve to be hit, and indeed, I would hit you. If I don't, you can figure out why for yourself. Likewise, if I don't talk to you continuously, it is so that you may meditate in your mind on the truths that I have taught you. Enter into your interior, unite with me, and I will always be with you to act in you." I was in my usual state. I found myself out of my body with my adorable Jesus. Seeing him crowned with thorns, I took off his crown and, with both hands, placed it on my head, pressing it firmly. Oh! How I felt the thorns penetrate me! However, I felt happy to suffer to alleviate Jesus' suffering. I told him, "My good Jesus, tell me if there is much time left before you take me to heaven." He replied, "Truly, very little." I repeat, "Your very little might just be 10 or 20 years old. Already I have reached 42 years. He said, "That's not true. Your years didn't start until you started to be a victim. My kindness has called you. You can say that, since that time, you have really started to live. Just as I have called you to live my life on earth. Thus, in a very short time, I will call you to live my life in heaven." At this time, 2 columns came out of the hands of the blessed Jesus, who later became one. He placed these columns firmly on my shoulders, in such a way that I could not remove myself from below. When he called me to him, no one came to place his shoulders under these columns, and they remained hanging in his hands. At that time, massacres of all kinds were coming. I understood that these columns represented the Church and the world, which came out of the most holy hands of Jesus and are kept inside his holy wounds. They will always be there. But if the good Jesus does not find where to put them, very quickly he will get tired of holding them in his hands. Beware of the horrible misfortunes that will occur. These misfortunes are so numerous that I believe it is better not to talk about them. Being in my usual state, Jesus came briefly and, without thinking, I said to him, "Lord, yesterday I was confessing. If I had died and seen that confession forgives sins, would you not have brought me directly to heaven?" He said to me, "My daughter, it is true that confession forgives sins. However, the safest and most certain way to escape purgatory is love. Love must be the predominant passion of the soul. Love in thoughts. Love in words. Love in action. Everything, absolutely everything, must be wrapped in love. Thus, uncreated love, finding that the soul is totally love, absorbs in it the created love. In fact, purgatory does nothing but to fill the voids of love present in the soul. And when these voids are filled, the soul surrenders to heaven. If there are no such voids in the soul, she has nothing to do in purgatory." I was in my usual state when blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, the true sign that a soul lives in my will, it is that in all circumstances it remains at peace. My will is so perfect and holy, that it cannot produce even the shadow of agitation. If, in contradictions, mortifications or bitterness, The soul feels troubled. It cannot say that it is in my will. If she feels resigned and, at the same time, troubled, she can say that she is at best in the shadow of my will. The soul that is out of my will feels all these disturbances. But not the soul that is in my will. Having fellowshipped with someone about the divine will, I affirmed that if a person is in the divine will and feels aridity, he must keep his peace. Later, while I was in my usual state, Jesus corrected me by saying, "My daughter, be very careful when you talk about my will. For my will is so happy that it forms our very bliss. The human will, on the other hand, is so unfortunate that, if it could enter into our will, it would destroy our happiness and wage war against us. Neither aridities, nor temptations, nor defects, nor turbulence, nor cold can coexist with my will. Because it is light and contains all the flavors. The human will is nothing but a small drop of darkness filled with disgusting things. Therefore, if a soul is in my will, as soon as it has entered it, in its very contact, her little drop of darkness has been dissolved by my light so that this light can dwell in her. The warmth of my will dissolved his coldness and aridities. My divine flavor has taken away its blandness. And my happiness freed her from her sadness. Being in my usual state, I found myself out of my body in a church. And I thought I saw a very beautiful lady with breasts so full of milk that they seemed about to burst. Calling me, the lady said to me, "My daughter, this represents the state of the church. She is all full of inner bitterness and, moreover, she is about to taste the outward bitterness. You, suffer a little so that these bitternesses are diminished." Saying this, she opened her breasts and, forming a vase with her hands, she filled them with milk which she gave me to drink. It was very bitter and it caused me so much suffering that I don't know how to say it. At that moment, I saw people involved in a revolution, entering churches, stripping altars, burning them, trying to murder priests, breaking the statues and making thousands of other insults and abuses. While they were doing this, the Lord sent more chastisements from heaven. Many were killed. It sounded like a general heckling against the church, the government, and between the people themselves. I was scared. I returned to my body and found myself in the presence of our Queen Mother accompanied by other saints. They prayed to Jesus Christ to make me suffer. Jesus seemed to pay no attention to them, but they insisted. Bored, blessed Jesus said, "Do not bother me, otherwise I will take it with me. It seems to me that I have suffered a little. I can say that, overall, during these last days, when I was in my usual state, I saw only revolutions and punishments." Blessed Jesus was almost always taciturn, and from time to time I simply said things to me like, "My daughter, don't do violence to me, otherwise I will make you leave this state." So I replied, "My life and my all, if you want to be free to do what you want, take me with you. So you can do whatever you want." These days, it takes a lot of patience to deal with blessed Jesus. While I was in my usual state, Jesus came for a brief moment and said to me, "My daughter, that my grace may have free access to the soul, it must be in the world, as if there were nothing but God and herself. Because any other thought or thing is placed between the soul and God, preventing the grace to enter the soul and the soul to receive grace." Another day, he said to me, "My daughter, what renews my passion the most is the lack of determination. Ah! They are loose enough to not only not to keep their commitments among themselves, but also towards me. And it is only with me that they come to such cowardice and ingratitude, even though they know that I suffer greatly because of it. At some point, they promise and the next moment, they reneged on their promise. I live very bitter days in a continual deprivation of my Jesus. At most, it comes as a shadow or a lightning bolt and almost always with threats of punishment. Oh God, what hell! It seems that the world is shaken. All are in the attitude of revolting and killing each other. The Lord seems to withdraw His grace and men become like ferocious beasts. I do better to remain silent, because talking about these things embitters too much my poor soul, which is well enough filled with bitterness. This morning he came briefly and said to me, all the works of God are perfect, and their perfection is recognized. Their roundness, or, at least, to their build. Thus, no stones are found in the heavenly Jerusalem, which is not round or square. I didn't understand anything about this until, looking at the vault of the heavens, I observed that the stars, sun, and moon have a round shape. The earth is also round. However, I could not understand the meaning of all this. Jesus added, the roundness is the same in all its parts. Similarly, the soul, to be perfect, must be the same in all circumstances. In prosperity or adversity. In sweetness or bitterness. It must be equal in everything, so that it is like a round object. Otherwise, if the soul is not equal to itself in all things, she will not be able to enter, beautiful and pretty, into the heavenly Jerusalem. It will not be able to adorn the homeland of the blessed like a star. Thus, the more the soul is the same in all things, the closer it gets to divine perfection. I was in my usual state, and blessed Jesus was not coming. I was afflicted by his absence, and also by thought that my victim status may no longer be God's will. It seemed to me that I had become nauseating before God, worthy only of being taken in horror. While I was thinking like this, he suddenly came and said to me, my daughter, whoever chooses himself, even for a moment, repels grace, is the master of himself and makes God his slave. Then he added, the will of God makes us take possession of God. Obedience is the key to opening the door and taking that possession. Then he disappeared. Continuing in my state of deprivation and, therefore, with little suffering, I said to myself, not only am I deprived of Jesus, but also of the blessing of suffering. O God, you want to submit me to fire and the sword, and touch the two things that are most dear to me and that form my true life. Jesus and the cross. If, for Jesus, I am abominable because of my ingratitude, it is just that he does not come. But you, O cross, what have I done to you so that you have left me in such a barbaric way? Ah! Didn't I always receive you well when you came? Haven't I always treated you as a faithful companion? Ah! I remember that I loved you so much that I didn't know how to live without you, and that sometimes I preferred you to Jesus himself. I don't know what you did to me so that I couldn't live without you anymore. However, you left me. It is true that you did me a lot of good. You were the way, the door, the room, the secret and the light in which I could find Jesus. That's why I love you so much. And now it's all over for me. While I was thinking like this, blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, my daughter, the cross is part of life. Only those who do not love their own lives do not love the cross. Because it was only through the cross that I grafted the divinity onto lost humanity. Only the cross continues the redemption in the world. Grafting to the divinity whoever receives it. And if someone doesn't like it, it means they don't know anything. The virtues. To perfection. To the love of God and to real life. Imagine a rich man who has lost his fortune and to whom we provide the means to find it, and even more. How much will he not like this way? Will he not invest his own life in this means in order to regain his life through his riches? So it is for the cross. Man has become very poor. The cross is the means. Non seulement de le sauver de la misère, mais de l'enriquir de tous les biais. La croix est la fortune de l'âme. Puis il disparut. Etj suis resté plus amir encore en pensant à ce que j'avais perdu. Après avoir passé plusieurs jours dans la privation et les larmes, Jesus est finalement venu ce matin. Ilma dit. Ah! My daughter, you don't know anything about what is to happen in the coming year. Oh! So many things are going to happen. Look! At that moment, I found myself out of my body in the company of Jesus. We saw collapsed squares, cities completely burned, flooded areas from which everything that was there had disappeared. Other places had experienced earthquakes with considerable damage and deaths. Elsewhere, there were revolutions, some of which were so violent that one could not put your feet without stepping on human blood. Who could tell all the tragedies we could see? Then my good Jesus said to me, "Have you seen? Ah, my daughter, courage and patience in the state in which you find yourself, for while she wants to pour out on the creatures, justice subsides by pouring out upon you. And the emptiness of your sufferings fills the emptiness of their sufferings. Let's set justice in motion. This is necessary, because creatures become far too bold. Thus, everything will end, and I will be with you as before." Being in my usual state, I found myself out of my body. And I saw Jesus' child get on my bed. He hit my body with his hands and also kicked me a few times. After beating me well and trampling on me, he disappeared. I reintegrated my body, but without understanding the reason for these blows. I was happy, however, since I had been very close to Jesus while he was beating me. Still all rossed, I was surprised again by Jesus blessed who, removing from his head his crown of thorns, fixed it on my head with such force that the thorns penetrated into me. Then, placing himself within myself, as if in a position to move forward, he said to me, "My daughter, how are you? Let's go ahead, let's go further in the punishments for the world." I became frightened when I saw that he was uniting my will with his so that we would continue the chastisements of the world between the two of us. He added, "What I tell you, you must not forget. Remember that some time ago I made you see the punishments present and those that I was about to send. You, presenting yourselves before my justice. You pleaded so hard for humanity by offering yourself to suffer anything, that it was conceded to you that instead of chastising for 10, I would chastise for 5. That is why, this morning, I struck you. So that you can grant yourself what you desire, instead of doing 10, I will do 5. He added, "My daughter, love is what ennobles the soul and puts it in possession of all my riches. True love admits no restrictions, even if one is inferior to the other. What is mine is yours, the language of two beings who truly love each other. For true love transforms. Thus, the beauty of one makes the ugliness of the other disappear and makes it beautiful. If one is poor, I make him rich. If he is ignorant, I make him learned. If he is vile, I make him noble. Two beings who love each other are one. In their heartbeat. In their breaths. In their wills. If other heartbeats or breaths want to enter them, they feel suffocated, hurt, and become sick. True love is health and holiness. With him we breathe an embalmed air, that of love itself. But it is in sacrifice that love is more particularly ennobled, reinforced, confirmed, and intensified. Love is the flame and sacrifice the wood that feeds it. If there is more wood, the flames are higher and the fire increases. What is sacrifice? It's emptying yourself. In love and in the being of the loved one. The more we sanctify ourselves, the more we are consumed in the being of the loved one. Losing one's own being and acquiring all the traits and nobility of the divine being. Note that this is the case in the natural world, albeit very imperfectly. Who is the one who acquires a name, nobility, heroism? Is it the soldier who sacrifices himself, gets involved in the battle and puts his life in danger for the love of the king? Or the one who stays with his hands on his hips? Certainly the first. The same goes for the servant. Who can hope to sit at their master's table? Is it the faithful servant, who knows how to sacrifice himself, invest his life, and who is filled with love for his master, or is it the servant who, while carrying out his task, avoids sacrificing himself when he can? Certainly the first. This is the case for the son with his father, the friend with his friend, etc. Love ennobles and unites. He is one. Sacrifices the wood that allows the fire of love to increase. Obedience, on the other hand, orders all this. This morning, finding myself in my usual state, I felt Jesus move within me. He kept telling me, "Let's move forward." Hearing this, I became tense and said, "Lord, why do you say, 'Let's move forward'? Say instead, 'I will move forward with the punishments.' I am apprehensive about involving my will in this." He continued, "My daughter, my will and yours are one, and if I say, 'Let us move forward with the punishments,' don't I say the same thing about the good I do to creatures, which surpasses, oh, by how much? Punishments? Moreover, are you not united with me in the many punishments that I do not send? Those who are united to me in good, should they not also be in mortifications? Between you and me, there must be no division. You're nothing but a little blade of grass, to whom God has pleased to grant a wonderful virtue. Those who do not know the virtue contained in this small blade of grass trample on it and do not even look at it. Thus, those who do not know the gift that I have put in you and the virtue contained in my little blade of grass, not only trample you, but don't understand how much I like to value the smallest things." After that, he seemed to tilt his head over mine. I said, "Oh, please make me feel your thorns." He replied, "Do you want me to hit you?" To which I replied, "Yes." At this moment, a wand with fireballs was in his hands, and upon seeing the fire, I said, "Lord, I am afraid of fire, beat me only with the wand." He continued, "You don't want to be beaten, I'm leaving." Thus, he disappeared without giving me time to beg him to fight me as he pleased. Oh! How perplexed and sorrowful I remained! But he, who is always so good, will forgive me. Finding myself in my usual state, blessed Jesus came briefly, and upon seeing him, I said to him, "My sweet life, how evil I have become! I feel reduced to nothing, I no longer feel anything, everything is empty in me. I feel nothing but an enchantment in me. And, in this enchantment, I await you so that you may fill me. But I wait in vain. On the contrary, I always feel like I'm back to nothing." Jesus said to me, "Ah! My daughter, are you grieving because you feel reduced to nothing? On this subject, I tell you that the more a creature is reduced to nothing, the more it is filled by the all. And if there remains in her even a shadow of herself, this shadow prevents me from giving myself completely to her. Your constant returns to your nothingness mean that you lose your human being to recover the divine being." Finding myself in my usual state, I united with our Lord by founding my thoughts, my heartbeat, my breaths and all my movements with His, with the intention of going to all creatures to communicate all this to them. Moreover, as I was united with Jesus in the Garden of Olives, I gave to every creature, as well as to the souls of purgatory, the drops of His blood, His prayers, His suffering and all the good He did, so that all their movements, heartbeats, and breaths are repaired, purified and deified. Moreover, I distributed His sufferings as a remedy for all. While I was doing this, blessed Jesus said to me inside, "My daughter, by these intentions, you continually hurt me. Since you do this often, one arrow does not wait for the other, always causing new wounds in me." I said to him, "How is it possible that you are hurt by me? When you make me suffer so much? By making me wait after your coming? What are these injuries? Do they correspond to the love you have for me?" He said, "In fact, I didn't say anything about everything I have to say to you. The soul that is on pilgrimage cannot understand all the benefits and love that circulate between the Creator and the creatures. She can't understand That his actions, words, and sufferings are part of my life, and that only by acting like you can she do good to all. I'm just telling you that your thoughts, your heartbeat, your movements, your limbs, and your sufferings are all lights that come from you. When they reach me, I spread them for the good of each one, while I return to you 3 times as many lights and graces. Moreover, in paradise, I will give you glory for everyone. It is enough for me to tell you that there is such a union and closeness in paradise. That the Creator is the organ and the creature the sound. The Creator the sun and the creature the rays. The Creator the flower and the creature perfumes it. Can we live there without the other? No, certainly not. Do you think I don't take into account of all your inner acts and of all your sufferings? How could I, since they come from me and are one with me? I also add that whenever my passion is recalled, it is a treasure available to all. It is as if we put it on a distributor to multiply and distribute it for the good of all. Having heard of a person who is easily distracted during communion, I said to Jesus inside me, how is it possible to be distracted during communion? Subsequently, finding myself in my usual state, I did my customary inner acts. And it was as if distractions wanted to enter me. But blessed Jesus put his hands before them to prevent them from entering me. He said to me, my daughter, if the soul suffers from distractions or troubles, it is a sign that she has not totally given herself to me. In fact, if the soul has totally given itself to me, since it is totally mine, I know how to keep my gift in good custody. But, if she didn't give me everything, because of his free will, I cannot give him that care. And she is forced to suffer those unwelcome things that disturb my union with her. However, when the soul is totally mine, it has no effort to make to stay calm. It's my full responsibility to prevent the entry into it of anything that could disturb our union. Finding myself in my usual state, I reflected on the moment when blessed Jesus met his Blessed Mother on the way to Calvary. And as I sympathized with them, the sweet Jesus said to me, my daughter, my mother went out on the day of my passion only to meet and endure her Son. Similarly, in the soul that truly loves, his intention in all his actions is only to meet his beloved and relieve him of the weight of his cross. And since human life is a continual chain of actions, both external and internal, the soul constantly meets his beloved. Is this soul only meeting his beloved? No. She greets him, kisses him, consoles him, and loves him, if only by a little note in passing. And his beloved is satisfied and content. Every action involves a sacrifice. If this action is done with the intention of encountering the sacrifice it contains, it will serve to relieve me of the weight of my cross. And what is not the joy of this soul which, by means of its actions, is always in touch with me? My love for her increases with each new encounter with me made through her actions. However, as are few who use their actions to make it the shortest way to come to me, to attach oneself to me and to relieve me of the many afflictions caused to me by creatures. When he came, told me that in these visits of our Lord, I did not earn any merit and that I deserved something only when I practiced virtue. He also asked me to pray for some of his needs. During the course of the day, I felt challenged by these remarks. In trying to clarify this question, I thought to myself, my adorable good, you know that I have never cared about the question of merits, but only about loving you. It seems to me that they want to make me a servant in your house, as if I should be interested in earnings. No, I don't want to be a servant, but your daughter. Better yet, I want you to be my beloved and I want to be all yours. But this thought comes back to me often. Afterwards, while I was in my usual state, my blessed Jesus came and said to me, my daughter, didn't tell you the truth. When I come in a soul, I never come unnecessarily. But I bring him something useful. Sometimes I speak to him of the virtues. Sometimes I correct it. Sometimes I communicate my beauty to her, in such a way that anything else seems ugly to her, etc. And even if I say nothing to this soul, it is certain that love continues to develop in her. The more she loves me, more I love him back. I would add that the merits of love are so great, so noble, and so divine that, compared to other merits, they are of pure gold while the latter are of lead. When M comes to see you, he does not come as a statue. And, as a result, he tries to tell you things and do you good, but he does it like a creature. And I, who am the creator, would I do useless things? At that moment, I remembered the intentions that M had recommended to me and prayed to the Lord for him to answer him. While I was making this request, it seemed to me to see M with a silver-colored garment and a black veil descending from his head and covering part of his eyes. And that veil seemed to extend to another person behind him. I didn't understand any of this, and blessed Jesus said to me, "The silver garment you see on him is the purity of his intentions, and the black veil the human who is mixed in it. The human who mingles in it is like a veil that covers the light of truth that shines in his mind. Sometimes he makes him act in fear, or he leads him to act to satisfy someone else and not according to the truth that my grace makes shine in his mind." I said to Jesus, "Lord, grant him what he asks, for this is something that is very much about your glory." He replied, "For an unresolved soul, the postponement to the next day gives the enemy time to win the battle, while not giving him time and being resolute and unwavering. Close the door and give the soul the benefit of not even exposing itself to fighting. Thus, if M wants to reach his goal quickly, this is the right way. I will be with him and we will be victorious. Subsequently, those who will have opposed the most will be those who will be most favorable to him and who will admire him the most, seeing that he will have renounced their human views." Finding me in my usual state, blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, a good way to know if a soul is in my grace is that the soul is ready to cooperate when grace comes. Grace can be compared to the electric current that acts only if the device has been prepared for the current to pass. If the preparation has not been made or wires are broken or destroyed, then, even if the current presents itself, the light cannot communicate." Then he disappeared. Finding myself in my usual state, I thought of the enormous burden that blessed Jesus carried when he was under the cross, and I thought to myself, "Lord, life is also a burden, but what a burden! Especially because you, my God Most High, are very far away." At that moment, he came and said to me, "My daughter, it's true that life is a burden. However, when the soul carries this burden with me and when she considers that at the end of this life she will be able to discharge this burden in me, she will see that this burden will be transformed into a cash treasure. Pearls, precious stones, diamonds and all the riches capable of making her happy for all eternity." After communion, I said, "Lord, always hold me tight on you because I am too small, and being so small I could get lost." He replied, "I want to teach you how to be with me. First, you have to enter into me, transform you into me and take for yourself what you find in me. Second, when you are filled with me completely, go outside and operate in cooperation with me as if you and I were one, in such a way that if I move, you also move, and if I think, you think of the same thing as me. In other words, everything I do, you do too. Third, with these acts that we have done together, withdraw for a moment. Go to the midst of creatures and gives everyone all the things we have done together. Gives my divine life to everyone. Immediately afterwards, return to me. To give me in the name of all the glory they must give me. Pray. Excuse them. Repairs. Love, yes, love me for all, satiate me with love. In me there is no passion. Sependent, sil povate yn avoir un, cec right l'amour. En fait, l'amour en moi est plus qu'une passion, c'est ma vie. Et si les passions peuvent être détruites, ma vi nele put pa. Voice cum bien ilmest nécessaire d'être me. Don, a moi al. Finding me in my usual state, blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, shyness stands in the way of grace and harms the soul. A shy soul will never be able to handle great things. Nor for God. Nor for the next one. Nor for itself. The shy soul acts as if it has its legs tied. Unable to walk freely, her eyes are always fixed on itself and on the efforts it takes him to walk. Shyness makes him keep his eyes down, never high. When she acts, she draws her strength. Not of God, but by itself. And, therefore, instead of gaining strength, it loses strength. If grace seeds in her, it happens to her like a poor farmer who, having seeded and worked his small field, reaps little or nothing at all. The brave soul does in one day what the shy soul does in a year. Being in my usual state, I wondered why only the cross allows us to be sure that we love the Lord. Even if there are many other things, for example, virtues, prayer, and sacraments, that could also allow us to know if we truly love the Lord. While I was thinking like this, blessed Jesus came and said to me, "My daughter, this is fine. Only the cross can be sure that we truly love the Lord, but the cross carried with patience and resignation. If there is patience and resignation before the cross, it is because God's love is present. Indeed, since nature is very refractory to suffering, if patience is there, it is not natural but divine. That is, the soul loves the Lord not only with his own love, but also with divine love. So how can we doubt that this soul really loves God, if it loves him with divine love itself? Regarding other things, including the sacraments, the soul can also have divine love within it. But these things cannot give the certainty that the cross gives. Love might not be there because of the lack of good dispositions. Someone may very well go to confession, but if he lacks the right dispositions, one cannot conclude that he loves God. If someone goes to receive communion, he receives the divine life well, but it can only be said that this divine life remains in him if he really has the required dispositions. Someone can take communion or go to confession, but when opportunities arise, if patience is lacking, love is also lacking. Since love is recognized only through sacrifice, the cross, patience, and resignation are fruits produced only by grace and love. While I was in my usual state, blessed Jesus came briefly. He seemed to approach me very close to me to make me hear the beating of his heart. These beats were very strong, and each was accompanied by several small beats. Jesus said to me, "My daughter, this is the state in which my heart was during my passion. All human lives throbbed in my heart. With their sins, they were all in a position to give me death. But, in spite of their ingratitude, my heart, moved by the power of love, gave life back to everyone. That is why my heart throbbed with such force. My beats contained all human heartbeats, making them turn into beats of graces of love and divine delights." Then he disappeared. As I had received several visitors during the day, I felt tired and, internally, I complained to our Lord, telling him, "Remove the creatures from around me, because I feel very oppressed. I don't know what they find me and want from me. Have mercy on me because of the violence I have to do to myself continuously to keep myself with you internally and be with creatures externally." At that moment, the Virgin Mother came and, with her right hand pointed inward, where my kind Jesus seemed to be, she said to me, "My dear daughter is not depressed. For creatures go where a treasure is found. And as there is in you the treasure of suffering, in which my sweet Son is, they come to you. As for you, while taking care of them, do not let yourself be distracted from your treasure, the cross and my Son. But make everyone love him. Thus, you will send them back all enriched." I was in my usual state when a demon doing strange things showed up. As soon as he had disappeared, I no longer thought of him or his strange behavior. all busy that I was with my supreme and only good. Afterwards, a thought came to me. How bad and tasteless I am, nothing impresses me. Blessed Jesus said to me, my daughter, there are regions where plants are not submissive. Cold, frost or snow. Thus, they are not stripped of their leaves, flowers, and fruits. If they take a break, it is for a short time after their fruits have been picked. There is the time necessary for it to grow others. In fact, the warmth of the sun fertilizes them in an admirable way. And they are not subject to delays, as is the case for plants in cold regions. These poor plants, because of the cold and snow, raging for many months, are forced to give only a few fruits and for a very short time, which almost tests the patience of the farmer who grows them. Souls who have come to union with me are like the first category of plants. The warmth of my union dissipates the cold of their human inclinations. Who would like to make them sterile and stripped of their divine leaves and fruits? The frosts of passions and the snow of disturbances would like to prevent the fruits of grace from manifesting in them. But their union with me protects them. Nothing really impresses them. And nothing enters into their interior that can harm our union and our rest. The totality of their lives revolves around me. Thus, their inclinations and passions are for God. And if, sometimes, there is a small pause, it is nothing but a momentary absence of my presence in them, so that I can later give them the surprise of greater consolations and reap more fruits of patience and heroism, which will have matured during my absence. It is quite the opposite in imperfect souls. They resemble plants from cold regions, sensitive to all disturbances. Their lives are based more on impressions than on reason and virtues. Inclinations, passions, temptations, troubles, and all life events are for them, such as cold, snow, frosts and hail, which hinder the development of my union with them. And when it seems that they have had a beautiful flowering, all it takes is a setback, something that disturbs them, so that this beautiful flowering withers and falls on the ground. Thus, they are always at the beginning, produce very little fruit and test my patience while I cultivate them. This morning I felt more oppressed than ever because of the deprivation of my supreme and one good. However, at the same time, I was calm and without that anxiety that usually leads me to walk between heaven and earth until I found it. I was like, what a change! I feel petrified by the pain of your absence. And, at the same time, I do not cry and I feel a deep peace inhabit me completely. No breath of opposition enters me. At that moment, blessed Jesus came and said to me, my daughter, don't worry. You should know that when there is a strong storm at sea, this storm is only superficial. The deep sea is perfectly calm. Its waters are tranquil. And the fish, when they detect the storm, will snuggle up in the deep water to be safer. The storm is really sweeping there, where the water is shallow, where it can shake it from the surface to the bottom and even move its water to other points of the sea. This is what happens with souls. When they are completely filled with God to the point of overflowing, storms can in no way shake them. For no force can defy God. At most the soul can feel the storm superficially. Moreover, when the soul detects the storm, it puts its virtues in order and runs to snuggle up in the depths of God. So, even if there seems to be a storm outwardly, it is only appearance. It is then that the soul enjoys the most peace, rest, tranquility in the womb of God, like the fish at the bottom of the sea. It's the opposite for our souls, which are empty of God or contain Him only a little. Storms shake them completely. If they have only a little bit of God, they lose what little they have. Moreover, it does not take a big storm to shake them. The slightest wind is enough for their combings to dissipate. Even more, the holy things themselves, which form a delicious food for souls filled with God, turn into storms for these souls. They are beaten by all the winds. There is never calm in them. For, logically, where the totality of God is not found, the inheritance of peace is not found either. Being in my usual state, I found myself out of my body. It seemed to me to see and other priests. A young man of divine beauty approached me and gave me food. I asked him to offer this food to and others as well. Then, approaching the young man gave him a good position by saying to him, "I share my food with you and, on your side, satisfy my hunger by giving me souls." He said this by showing the work that wants to do. He also gave her strong impulses and inspirations internally. Then he gave food to the others. At this moment, a venerable woman introduced herself, and those who had received food gathered around her and asked her for explanations about my condition. The woman replied, "The state of this soul is one of continual prayer, sacrifice and union with God. Moreover, while she is in this state, she is exposed to all the events of the church, the world, and the righteousness of God. Then she prays, repairs, disarms and prevents as much as she can the punishments that the righteousness of God wants to send on creatures. Afterwards, things are all suspended." Hearing this, I thought to myself, I'm so mean. But they say it's my condition. Meanwhile, I found myself near a small, very high window through which I could see all that was happening in the church and in the world, and the punishments that were about to fall. Who could describe them all? I give up so as not to be too long. Oh! How I groaned and prayed! I would have liked to tear myself to pieces in order to counter all this. Then everything disappeared instantly and I found myself in my body. If there is passion, the demon has more strength. While I was in my usual state, Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, temptation can easily be overcome. For the devil is the most cowardly creature that can exist. It only takes an opposite act, contempt, or prayer to make him flee. In fact, these acts make him more fearful, and in order not to have to bear the confusion, as soon as he realizes that the soul is determined not to pay attention to his suggestions, he runs away terrified. However, if the soul cannot easily free itself, it means that it is not only a temptation, but of a passion rooted in the soul which, together with temptation, tyrannizes it. Thus the soul is unable to free itself. Where there is passion, the devil has more strength to fool the soul. This morning, when blessed Jesus came, he seemed to be dressed in a black coat. Approaching me, he seemed to place me under this cloak and said to me, "Thus, I will wrap all creatures as in a black coat." Then he disappeared. I felt challenged because of certain punishments. I have begged him to return, since I can no longer do without his presence. But I continued to be challenged by the vision I had just seen. After I insisted for a long time, he came, bringing in his hand a cup of liquid. He gave me some to drink and he said to me, "My daughter, peaceful souls eat at my own table and drink from my own cup. And, moreover, the divine archer keeps unticking arrows on them. None of these arrows are lost. All of them hurt the beloved soul. And she faints while the archer continues with his arrows. Sometimes they make her die of love. Sometimes they bring her back to a new life of love. On the other hand, from his injuries, soul throws its arrows to hurt the one who hurt it so much. This is how the peaceful soul makes God's delights and amusement. As for restless souls, if the divine archer sends them arrows, these are lost by the soul, which leaves the divine archer bitter, but amuses the devil. Being in my usual state, I found myself out of my body in a garden where I saw Queen Mom sitting on a very high throne. I was burning with the desire to ascend to the top of the throne to kiss his hand. And as I tried to get there, she went downstairs and gave me a loud kiss on the face. Looking at it, I saw like a light in its interior in which the word Fiat was written. From this word descended endless seas. Virtues, graces, greatness, glory, joy, beauty, and of everything that our Queen Mother contains. All these goods came from Fiat. Oh, how powerful, fruitful, and holy this Fiat! Who will be able to understand this? It is so big that I remain silent on it. So, I stop here. I looked at her all dazzled and she said to me, "My daughter, all my holiness came to me from the word Fiat. I never moved in the slightest. Not even taken a single breath. Not taken a single step or done any other action, except in the will of God. My life, my food, my whole was the will of God. It produced sees in me holiness, wealth, glory, and honor. Everything was divine, not human. The more the soul is united and identified with the will of God, the more holy it can be said to be, and the more she is loved by God. And the more she is loved by God, the more she is favored. Because the life of the soul is nothing but the product of God's will. How could God not love this soul, since it is His own thing? Therefore, one should not worry about knowing if we do a lot or little, but rather whether it is willed by God or not. In fact, the Lord looks more at the little things, if they are made in His will, that the great ones do out of His will. I was saddened that I could not receive communion every day. My good Jesus came and said to me, "My daughter, I don't want anything to trouble you. It is true that communion is a great thing, but how long does the close union between the soul and me last? A quarter of an hour at most. What you must cherish the most is the complete renunciation of your will in favor of mine. For he who lives in my will, there is a close union not only for a quarter of an hour, but always, always. My will is continual communion with the soul. It's not just once a day, but every hour. At every moment. That the soul that makes my will is in close communion with me. I was living very bitter days. Because of the deprivation of my supreme and one good, and also because of the persistent thought that my condition may have been just a smokescreen. My suffering was increased by my obligation to remain continuously in my bed, without movement or occupation, waiting for my confessor. I was also deprived of my usual drowsiness. All this, accompanied by my incessant tears, tormented me to the point of getting sick. Many times I prayed to my confessor to give me permission to sit in my bed, according to my habit, and to do my usual embroidery work, when I was not asleep, and Jesus did not make me share a mystery of His passion as a victim. But my confessor absolutely defended this from me. He said that this state, even deprived of my supreme good, should be considered a state of victim because of the pain of Jesus' deprivation and also by virtue of obedience. I have always obeyed, but my martyred heart constantly told me, "Isn't this a pure fad? Where is your drowsiness, your state of victim? Get up, get up. Don't look for excuses. Work, work. Don't you see that your pretensions lead you to damnation? Aren't you afraid? Aren't you thinking of God's terrible judgment? Don't you see that for so many years you have only carved out an abyss in which you will remain locked for eternity? O God! Who could say the cruel torture that tormented my soul, crushed me and plunged me into a sea of pain? But tyrannical obedience did not leave me even an atom of my own free will. May God's will be done. She who wants things to happen like this. Last night, when I was in my usual state and in the midst of this cruel torment, I found myself surrounded by people who said, "Recites a Pater, an Ave, and a Gloria in honor of Saint Francis of Paula. It will bring you some relief in your suffering." While I was doing this, the saint appeared to me, bringing me a bun that he gave me and said, "Eat it." I ate it and felt all strengthened. Then I told him, "Dear saint, I would like to tell you something." He replied very kindly, "What do you want to say to me?" I continued, "I am afraid that my condition is not according to God's will. During the first years of this disease, which I was then experiencing at intervals, I felt called by our Lord to become a victim. And I was taken by inner suffering and wounds such that it appeared outwardly that I was in a state of crisis. But now I fear that it was my imagination that was causing me these evils." On what the saint said to me, "A sure sign to know if a state is according to the will of God. It is that the soul is ready to do otherwise if it learns that the will of God no longer wants this state. But, not being convinced, I added. Dear Saint, I have not told you everything. Listen carefully. At first, it was intermittent. Then the Lord called me to continual self-immolation, and I have been continually bedridden for 21 years. Who could say all my tribulations? It seems to me that sometimes God leaves me alone and deprives me of suffering, the only faithful friend of my state. And I remain all crushed, without God and without the support of suffering, hence the doubts and fears that my condition might not be according to God's will. Full of kindness, the saint said to me, I repeat to you what I have already told you. If you are willing to do God's will when you know it, your state corresponds to His will. Subsequently, I felt strongly in my soul that, if I knew God's will clearly, I would be willing to subscribe to it, even at the cost of my life. Afterwards, I was quieter. May God always be thanked. I was in my usual state. For a short time, I felt our Lord near me. He told me, my daughter, for the soul that makes my will, it circulates in her whole being, like His blood. Thus, this soul is in continuous contact with me, with my power, my wisdom, my charity, and my beauty. She takes part in everything that is mine. As she no longer lives in her own will, she lives in mine. And as my will flows in His will circulates throughout my being, and I continually feel His touch. You can't understand how much, because of this, I feel carried to love Him, to promote it, to respond to each of His requests. If I did not answer Him, I would not answer to myself. Indeed, since she lives in my will, what she asks for is nothing but what I myself want. And, because she gets everything she asks for, she is happy for herself and for others. His life is more in heaven than on earth. This is the fruit of my will, to beatify the soul in advance. Finding myself in my usual state, I begged our Lord to be good enough to put peace in souls, these being in discord, and the poor wanting to attack the rich. It seems that people are thirsty for human blood, that they can no longer endure themselves. If the Lord does not get involved, we are about to have the chastisements He has often told me about. He came briefly and said to me, my daughter, there is a just justice. The rich were the first to set a bad example for the poor, to leave religion, to neglect their duties. They are made ashamed to enter the churches to attend Mass, to fulfill their obligations. The poor have fed on the bad example of the rich and, unable to contain themselves, they try to attack them and even kill them. There is no order without submission to God. The rich have separated themselves from God. People rebel against God, against the rich, and against everyone. The scale of my righteousness is filled and I can no longer contain it. Being in my usual state, I found myself out of my body in the middle of revolutions. People seemed more determined than ever to shed blood. I implored the Lord and He said to me, my daughter, there are two storms that men are preparing. One against the government and the other against the church. I could see leaders running away. The king seemed to fall into the hands of the enemy. The rich were in great danger and some were dying. What saddened me the most was that the revolution was also directed against the church and that among the revolutionary leaders were priests. When these things had reached their extreme limits, it seemed that a foreign power intervened. I will stop here because these are things described elsewhere. This morning I felt very oppressed because of the deprivation of my adorable Jesus. I thought to myself, I can't take it anymore. How can I continue without my life? What patience we need with you. What virtue could inspire you to come? At that moment, He came and said to me, my daughter, virtue, who triumphs over everything, who conquers everything, which levels everything and which softens everything, is the will of God. It has such power that nothing can resist it. While he was saying this, a full path, stones, thorns and steep mountains appeared before me. When this path was placed in the divine will, by the very power of that will, the stones were pulverized. The thorns were changed into flowers and the mountains were leveled. In the divine will, all things have the same appearance, the same color. May His most holy will always be blessed. I was in my usual state, saturated with bitterness and deprivation. It seemed to me that people were rebelling and intensifying the fight against the rich. The most gentle Jesus said to me in a plaintive tone, "I am the one who gives freedom to the poor. Because I'm tired of the rich. They've done enough. How much money wasted? In balls. In the theater. In unnecessary travel, in vanities, and even in sin. Meanwhile, the poor cannot have enough bread to feed themselves. They have been enslaved, they are disgusted and bitter. If the rich had given them only what they spent on useless things, my poor would have been happy. But the rich treated them like strangers. They even despised them, keeping for them comfort and amusements as a right associated with their condition and leaving the poor in misery, as if it corresponded to their condition." While he was saying this, he seemed to withdraw his graces from the poor, which had the effect of making them aggressive against the rich so that serious things would happen. Seeing all this, I said, "My dear life and my greatest good. It is true that there are bad rich, but there are also good ones." "Like what?" "Those devout ladies who donate to the church, and also your priests who do so much for all." Jesus continues, "Ah, my daughter, stay quiet and do not touch this very painful point. I could tell you that I don't know these devout ladies. They give alms wherever they want, for their purposes, so that people are at their service. They spend thousands of lire for people they like, but for those who really need it, they do not even deign to give a penny. Can I say that they give alms out of love for me? Judge for yourself. Do these people know how to respond to real needs? Do they give a lot where it is not necessary, by refusing to give even little where there is need? Thus, you can judge that these people do not have a true spirit of charity, a true purity of intention, and conclude that my poor are forgotten, even by these devout people. And the priests? Ah, my daughter, it's even worse. You say they do good to all? You're fooling yourself. They do good to the rich, they have time for the rich. But, again, the poor are almost excluded. Priests have no time for them. They do not have a word of comfort to say to them. They send them away, going so far as to pretend that they are sick. I can say that if the poor have distanced themselves from the sacraments, the priests have contributed to this. For they always have time to confess the rich, but little for the poor. Thus, the poor get tired and do not return. If a rich person shows up, priests do not hesitate for a moment, time, words of comfort, help. They find everything for the rich. Can I say that they have a true spirit of charity if they choose those they want to listen to? And what about the poor? Or they send them elsewhere. Or they oppress them so much that, if my graces had not helped them in a special way, they would have disappeared from my church. Only a few priests have a true spirit of righteousness, true charity. After that, I remained more bitter than ever, begging for His mercy. Being in my usual state, blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, obedience is the door for me to enter the soul. If there is no such door, I can say that there is no place for me in this soul and that I am forced to stay outside." Being in my usual state, I was inundated with bitterness and deprivation. After receiving communion, I complained to blessed Jesus about the way He left me and of the uselessness of my state. With compassion, He said to me, "My daughter, nothing has altered the gifts we have exchanged with each other, because their value lies in their origin. Assumes that two persons are united by a bond of friendship or in marriage. that they have given themselves gifts and that they love each other to the point of having become inseparable. Each has copied the other and feels the being of the other in itself. Let us further assume that, out of strict necessity, they are forced to be separated from each other. Is it? Their reciprocal gifts will be diminished, or their love will be diminished because of this separation? On the contrary, their remoteness will only have the effect of to grow their love and to get them to give more care to the gifts exchanged, waiting for other surprise gifts at the time of their return. More than that, since each person has reproduced the loved one in him, it is as if there was no distance between them. Each feels the voice of the other in itself. Each feels the other flowing in his thoughts, his works, and his steps. She feels it both distant and close. She is looking for it but cannot find it. She touches it but she cannot sustain it. Therefore, their souls are in a continual martyrdom of love. As far as you are concerned, if my justice brings me to deprive you of me and to stay away from you for a while, can you say that I have taken away my gifts and that there is a decrease in love? I replied, it's too hard to endure my condition, my dear life. What am I doing here if you don't let me suffer, so that my fellow men may be spared punishment? You told me several times that you would prevent the rain, and it doesn't rain anymore. Thus, nothing can make you fail, everything you say, you do. If you were close to me as before, I would tell you so many things that you would let me win. How can you say that distance is nothing? He said. It is precisely for this reason that I am forced to keep my distance. Not to let yourself win, but to make room for justice. By doing so, there are benefits. Lack of water will lead to famine. The people will be humiliated and, after massacres and wars, grace will find them more willing to be saved. Isn't it also a benefit that, while war is about to be added to famine, that by keeping you like this, it be delayed and, as a result, more souls be saved? He added. Love never says enough. Even if love whips the soul and tears it to pieces, these pieces shout love. Love never says enough and, not content, he sprays these parts, reduces them to nothingness and, in this nothingness, he blows his fire and he gives it his own form. Nothing human is involved, but only the divine. That's when love sings his glory, his bravery, his wonders, and love says, I'm happy. My love has won, he has destroyed the human and built the divine. He arrives at love as a talented craftsman who, having many objects that are not in his hand, tears them to pieces, sets them on fire and leaves them there until they are melted and have totally lost their shape. Subsequently, he makes them new objects, more beautiful and more pleasant, worthy of his talent. It is true that, for humans, this activity of love is very hard. But when the soul see what she has won, she will see how beauty has replaced ugliness, wealth, poverty, nobility, vulgarity. Then she too will sing the glories of love. Having received Holy Communion, I saw in myself the child Jesus as if he was looking for something important. I said to him, my beautiful little, what are you looking for so carefully? He replied, my daughter, I am looking for the brush of your will so that I can paint my image in your heart. In fact, if you don't give me your will, I lack the brush with which I can paint myself freely in you. And while your will serve as my brush, love will be the dye, allowing me to paint all the colors of my image. Moreover, just as the human will serves as my brush, my will serves as a brush for the soul, so that she can paint her image in my heart. In me she will find abundant colors of love for the variety of colors. Having completed a meditation on he who sows the good will reap the good and he who sows vice will reap evil, I wondered what good I could cultivate taking into account my state of misery and incapacity. At that moment, I felt as if they were cultivating inside me, and I heard Jesus say to me, "The soul must cultivate the good with all its being. The soul possesses an intelligence and it must use it to understand God, to think only of the good and to allow no bad seed to enter it. This is to cultivate the good with one's spirit. It's the same with regard to his mouth. It must never say bad things, that is, bad words. The same goes for his heart. He must love only God alone, desire only Him, throb only for Him and tend only towards Him. With his hands, one must do only holy works. With one's feet, one must advance only according to the examples of our Lord." Hearing this, I thought to myself, "Thus, in my position, I can cultivate the good, even in the midst of my extreme misery." However, I was thinking about this with some fear of the accounts that Master will ask me. Will I have sown good or not? And, in my interior, I heard him say to me, "My kindness is so great that those who make me known as being severe, demanding, and rigorous are very at fault. Oh! What an affront they do to my love! I will not ask for accounts other than those corresponding to the small field that I have entrusted to the soul. I will not hold the soul to account. That to reward her according to her harvest. I will reward the soul in relation to its intelligence. The more she understood me during her earthly life, the more she will understand me in heaven, and the more she understands me, the more she will be flooded with joy and bliss. In relation to his mouth, I will give him the various divine flavors, and his voice will harmonize with that of all the other blesseds. In relation to its work, I will give him my gifts, and so on." While I was in my usual state, I wondered a lot about the state of my soul, and I thought to myself, who could say the evil that is in my soul so that the Lord would thus deprive me of Him and leave me abandoned to myself? At that moment, He came briefly and flooded me with His divine presence. My whole being was focused on Him. No fiber and no movement of my soul tended towards Him. Afterwards, He said to me, "Have you seen, my daughter? The sign that there is guilt in the soul when it is without me is that at the moment when I come back to manifest my presence to Him, it is not completely filled with God, and she is not immediately willing to immerse herself in me, in such a way that not even a fiber of itself is fixed on its center. If there is fault of the soul, or that there is in it something that is not completely mine, I cannot fill it completely, and she cannot fully immerse herself in me. Guilt cannot enter God. Therefore, rest assured, do not try to disturb yourself." Finding myself in my usual state, I was afflicted and almost dazed because of my customary privations. Jesus came as if in passing and said to me, "My daughter, what I want you to take to heart is constancy in the good, both inside and outside. The repetition of the act of loving myself and constancy in the good make the divine life grow in the soul. And this with such strength that it can be compared to a child who, growing up in the good air and with a good diet, grows up in full health until he has reached his normal stature, without the need for the doctor and remedies. It becomes so robust that it can help others. On the other hand, the soul that is not constant is like a child, which does not always feed on healthy food, and which breathes an infectious air. It becomes sickly, and because of its poor diet, its limbs do not develop properly. It develops with defects. A tumor forms in one place, an abscess in another. As a result, he walks limping and speaks with difficulty. It can be said that he is a poor cripple. Although some of its members are in good condition, its defective limbs are more numerous. And even if he consults doctors and takes medication, it doesn't do him much good. Because his blood is infected with a polluted atmosphere and because his limbs are weak and defective because of his malnutrition, he will become an adult, but without reaching his true stature. He will always need help and will not be able to help others. This is the case for the fickle soul. It's as if she is feeding on the wrong foods. By applying herself to things that are not of God, it is as if she is breathing polluting air. Thus, the divine life grows in it with difficulty and poverty. For he lacks the strength and vigor of constancy. I live bitter days because of the continual deprivation of blessed Jesus. He came briefly and told me, "My daughter, a sign to recognize whether someone possesses true charity is his love for the poor. In fact, if he loves the rich and is available to them, he can do so because he hopes to get something from them, or that he sympathizes with them, or because of their nobility, their intelligence, their eloquence, or even because he is afraid of it. However, if he loves the poor, helps and supports them, it is that he sees in them the image of God. Thus, it does not stop at their harshness, their ignorance, or their misery. Through their misery, as through a window, he sees God, from whom he hopes for everything. He loves them, helps them, consoles them as if he were doing it to God himself. This is the true coming, it starts from God and ends in God. On the other hand, what comes from matter produces matter and ends up in it. As splendid and virtuous as charity may seem, if one does not feel the touch of God, the one who practices it and the one who receives it are annoyed by it. In addition, it sometimes leads to making mistakes. Being in my usual state, blessed Jesus made himself see all light and said these simple words to me. I am light. But what is the light made of? What is its basis? Light is truth. Thus, I am light because I am truth. Therefore, to be light and have light in all one's actions, everything must be truth. Where there is artifice and duplicity, there can be no light, but only darkness. As a result of these few words, he disappeared at lightning speed. While I was chatting with my confessor, he told me how terrible it will be to see God's indignation. This is so true that, on the day of judgment, the wicked will say, "Mountains, fall on us, destroy us, so that we do not see the face of God indignant." I said to him, "In God, there can be no indignation. Things happen rather according to the state of the soul. If the soul is good, God's qualities and attributes attract it, and she is consumed with the desire to fully immerse herself in Him. If it is evil, the presence of God crushes it and makes it flee away from Him. Seeing itself rejected and having in it no seed of love for this God so holy and so beautiful, while it sees itself so bad and so ugly, the soul wants instead to flee the presence of God and even destroy itself. In God, there is no change, it is rather we who feel things differently depending on the state of our soul." Pure afterwards, I thought to myself, how stupid I was to speak like this. Later, while I was doing my meditation of the day, Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, you spoke well. I do not change, and it is rather the creatures who can feel my presence differently, according to their state of mind. In fact, how could a person who loves me be afraid then? That she feels the totality of my being flowing into her and forming her whole life? Can she really be embarrassed by my beauty if she strives to beautify herself more and more in order to please me and be like me? She feels the totality of my divine being flowing in her hands, feet, heart, and mind, so that my being belongs to her totally. And how could I be ashamed of her? This is impossible. Ah! My daughter, sin throws so much disorder into the creature that she comes to want to destroy herself, so as not to have to support my presence. On the day of judgment, it will be terrible for the wicked. Seeing no seed of love in them, but rather hatred towards me, my righteousness will compel me not to love them. And people who are not loved, we do not want to be with them and we try to keep them away from us. I will not want to have them with me and they will not want to be there. We will run away from each other. Only love unites everything and makes everyone happy." Being in my usual state, I was reflecting on the mystery of the flagellation. When Jesus came, he pressed his hands on my shoulders and said to me inside, "My daughter, I wanted. Let my flesh be shredded and let my blood flow from all my humanity to reunite in me all the lost humanity. In fact, of all that has been shredded from my humanity, flesh, blood, hair. Nothing remained scattered at my resurrection, but everything was reunited with my humanity. In doing so, I will incorporate all creatures into me. If, then, anyone separates from me, it is by his stubborn will and to be lost forever. Being in my usual state, blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, the more the soul deprives itself of things here on earth, the more it will be filled in heaven. The poorer one is on earth, the richer one will be in heaven. The more one is deprived of pleasures, amusements, travels, walks on earth, the more one will be fulfilled in God. Oh, how much the soul will be able to wander in the expanse of heaven, especially in the immeasurable heavens of the attributes of God. In fact, each of God's attributes is one more heaven, one more paradise. In the blessed, some are as if on the margins of God's attributes. Others are in their environment and others are found even higher. The more they circulate there, the more they taste and rejoice. Thus, whoever disposes of earthly things, even the smallest, chooses heaven. The more he has known contempt on earth, the more he will be honored. The smaller it has been, the bigger it will be. The more he has been submissive, the more he will dominate. And so on. However, how many choose to deprive themselves on earth to be filled in heaven? Almost no one. This morning, blessed Jesus made himself look a little like a shadow and he said to me, "My daughter, when the soul maintains itself in the attitude of doing good, grace is with her and gives life to all her actions. If, however, it becomes indifferent to doing good or accomplishes evil, my grace withdraws, unable to make a pact with these things and to communicate her life, dismayed, she withdraws with great displeasure. Do you want grace to always be with you and my life to form yours? Remains in the attitude of always doing good. Thus, the totality of my being will develop in you. And you will be less likely to grieve when you are deprived of my presence. In fact, without seeing me, you will touch me through all your actions that will partly soften the suffering of my deprivation." While I was in my usual state, blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, divine science is manifested in works done with righteousness. In fact, righteousness contains all the beauty and good that can be found. Order, utility, beauty, knowledge. A job is good as long as it is done in order. But if it is poorly arranged, badly screwed, we cannot get good out of it. All the things I did, from the biggest to the smallest, were well ordered and prove useful. For they were made in righteousness. To the extent that the creature is good, it is inhabited by divine science. To the extent that she acts righteously, good things come out of her. However, if she works carelessly, it can compromise the result of his work and compromise it itself. For divine science will then be put on the back burner. Anyone who does not act in righteousness, the paths of justice, holiness, and beauty, that is, the ways of God. It is like a plant that has little soil under it. The burning rays of the sun, strong winds and cold, prevent divine science from manifesting itself in it. This is the case for those who work carelessly. They deprive themselves of the soil of divine science and wither away in their own disorder. Being in my usual state, I was filled with bitterness and deprivation. This morning, blessed Jesus came for a short time and I complained to him about my condition. But, rather than answer me, he approached and said to me, "My daughter, the truly loving soul is not satisfied with loving myself emotionally and anxiously. She is satisfied only when she has made love her daily food. It is then that his love becomes solid and serious, rid of the usual inconstancy in creatures. And since she made love her food, this one is disseminated to all its members and gives her the strength to support the flames of love that consume her and fuel her life. Because she has love in her, it no longer works out of anxiety or according to emotions. But she only feels that she loves more and more. Such is the love of the blessed in heaven, it is my own love. The blessed burn, but without anxiety and without fuss. This is done in stability and in an admirably serious way. This is a sign that the soul has come to feed on love. His love is increasingly losing the characteristics of human love. If there is only anxiety and emotions, it is the sign that the soul has not made love its food, but that it is only parts of herself that she has devoted to love. Thus, because it is not entirely love, she does not have the strength to contain it in her end. This is how she has these emotions of human love. This soul is very demonstrative but without stability, while the first is stable like a mountain that never moves. Living my days in bitterness, I complained to our Lord, saying, "With what cruelty you have left me! You told me that you had chosen me as your little girl and that you would always keep me in your arms. However, what about now? You threw me to the ground and, rather than being your little girl, I see that you have made me a little martyr. And, although small, my martyrdom is as cruel and bitter as it is bitter and intense." At that moment, Jesus moved in me and said to me, "My daughter, you are wrong. My will does not make you a small martyr, but a great one. If I have given you strength to endure with patience and resignation the deprivation of my presence, which is the most painful and bitter thing that exists, to the point that no other punishment in heaven and on earth approaches or resembles him. Is this not the heroism of patience and the ultimate degree of love, in comparison with which all other loves are surpassed and almost cancelled? Is this not a great martyrdom? You say you are a little martyr because you think you don't suffer so much. It is not that you do not suffer, but that the martyrdom of my deprivation absorbs all your other sufferings, making them almost disappear. In fact, your situation of being without me causes you to not pay attention to your other sufferings and come to not feel their weight. As a result, you say that you are not suffering. So I didn't throw you on the ground. I keep you pretty well clinging in my arms. More than that, I tell you that if I gave Paul my effective grace during his conversion, I give you this grace to you almost continuously. The sign of this is that you continue to do inwardly all that you did when I was with you almost continuously. What you seem to be doing now alone and by yourself. That you are all immersed in me and connected to me, constantly thinking of me, even if you do not see me. It is not from you, it is a special and effective grace. And if I give you much, it is a sign that I love you very much and that I want you to love me very much as well. Finding myself in my usual state, I was bored of the little baby Jesus and, after much tribulation, Jesus appeared in me in the form of a little baby and he said to me, "My daughter, the best way to make me born in his heart is to empty himself of everything. Because by finding the empty space, I can place my possessions there. If I find room to place everything that belongs to me, only then can I settle there forever." It can be said that a person who has come to live with another is there only if he finds enough free space to place all his possessions there. Otherwise, she is not happy there. So it is for me. A second way to give birth and to increase my happiness in a soul is that all that it contains, both internally and externally, for me everything must be done to honor me and fulfill my orders. If even one thing, a thought, a word is not for me, I am unhappy about it. And, while I must be the master, I am made a slave. How can I tolerate this? A third way is heroic love, magnified love, sacrificial love. These three loves make my happiness grow in a wonderful way, because they make the soul capable of actions beyond its strengths, since it acts only with my strength. These loves make the soul grow by cooperating not only to increase its love for me, but also that of others. This soul will come to endure everything, even death, to triumph over everything and be able to tell me, "I have nothing else, everything in me is love for you." In this way, the soul will not only make me born in it, but it will make me grow. I will form a beautiful paradise in his heart. While he was saying this, I looked at him. And, from small as he was, he suddenly became fat. in such a way that I remained completely filled with Him. Then everything disappeared. I meditated on the moments when the Queen Mother gave milk to baby Jesus. I thought to myself, what was going on then between the Holiest Mother and little Jesus? At that moment, I felt Jesus move within me and I heard me say, "My daughter," when I sucked milk from the breast of my very sweet mother. At the same time, I sucked the love of His heart. It was much more the latter than the first one I sucked. It was as if she were saying to me, I love you, O Son," and that I answered Him, I love you, O Mother." And I wasn't alone. To my I love you, the Father, the Holy Spirit and all creation, angels, saints, stars, sun, drops of water, plants, the flowers, the grains of sand, all the elements joined me saying, we love you, O Mother of our God, in the love of our Creator." My mother was flooded with it. There wasn't a single small space where she couldn't hear me tell her that I loved her. His love was behind it all, almost alone, and repeated, I love you, I love you. However, she couldn't match me. Because the love of the creature has its limits, its time. While my love is uncreated, endless, eternal. The same thing happens to every soul when she tells me, I love you. I also said to him, I love you. And all creation joins me in loving him through my love. Oh! If creatures understood the good and honor they provide for themselves. Just by saying to myself, I love you. This is enough for a God to honor them by replying, I love you too. I was in my usual state. I felt like the earth was flickering under my feet and wanted to slip away. I felt worried and thought, Lord, Lord, what is going on? He said to me inside, earthquakes, without adding anything. I almost didn't pay attention to him. I continued my inner activities as usual. About 5 hours later, I suddenly felt noticeably an earthquake. As soon as it had stopped, a little confused, I found myself out of my body and I could see terrible things. However, this view disappeared quickly. And I found myself inside a church. A young man dressed in white and from the altar came to me. I think it was our Lord, but I'm not sure. Approaching me and with an imposing look, he said to me, Come. I shrugged my shoulders without moving. Assuming that he was sending plagues, I said, Lord, do you really want to take me now? The young man then threw himself into my arms. Inside me, I heard him say to me, Come, O my daughter, that I may end the world. I will destroy a good part of it by earthquakes, floods and wars. Then I came back into my body. I meditated on Jesus' early childhood and thought to myself, my little baby, how many sorrows have you wanted to submit to? It wasn't enough for you to come in the form of an adult. You also wanted to take the form of a baby and suffer in the diapers. In silence and in the stillness of your little humanity, in your feet, in your hands, etc. Why all this? As I thought about this, he stirred in me and said to me, My daughter, my works are perfect. I wanted to come as a little baby to deify all small sacrifices and all small actions that there is in early childhood. Thus, until the babies begin to commit sins, everything remains absorbed in my childhood and everything is deified by me. When sins begin to appear, then begins a separation between me and the creature. A separation painful for me and sad for her. I said to him, How can this be done since babies are not of the age of reason and so are they not capable of earning merits? He said, First, because I give the merits by my grace and, second, because it is not their will that can prevent them from gaining merits. They are in the state of early childhood as desired by me. A gardener who planted a plant is not only honored by it, but he picks the fruits. even if the plant does not have the use of a reason. This is the case for a craftsman who sculpts a statue, and for many others. Things. Only sin destroys everything and separates the creature from the Creator. For everything else, even for the simplest things, everything comes to the creature through me, and everything comes back to me with the mark of honor of the Creator. It is with great repugnance and obedience that I will continue to speak about what happened from December 28 concerning the earthquake. I was thinking about the fate of so many poor people buried alive under the rubble, and also of so many poor people, to that of Jesus Eucharist also buried under the rubble. I thought to myself, it seems to me that the Lord must say to these people, I suffer the same fate as you because of your sins. I stand with you to help you and give you strength. I love you so much that it only takes one last act of love on your part for you to be saved, and that I may ignore all the harm you have done in the past. Ah! My good, my life and my all, I adore you. Under the rubble and wherever you are, I send you my embraces, my kisses, and all my energies to keep you company. Oh! How I wish I could get out of the way and place yourself in more comfortable and more worthy places. At this moment, my adorable Jesus said to me inwardly, my daughter, you talk somewhere about excessive love that I have for people, even when I chastise them. However, there is more. Know that my fate in the sacrament of the Eucharist is perhaps less unfortunate under the stones than in the tabernacles. The sacrileges committed by the priests and by the people are so numerous that I become tired of descending into their hands and hearts, to the point of feeling compelled to destroy almost all of them. And what about the ambitions and scandals of some priests? Everything is darkness in them, they are no longer the light they are supposed to be. And when they stopped communicating my light, the people fall into excesses and my justice is forced to destroy them. Suffering a lot from loneliness because of his absence and fearing that some violent earthquakes will occur right here, I was so overwhelmed that I felt like I was dying. Jesus came as a shadow and said to me, compassionately, my daughter, don't feel so oppressed. Because of you, I will spare this city from serious damage. See for yourself if I must not continue to punish, instead of converting, people. Hearing about the destruction of other provinces, say that it is these regions that are the cause of these punishments and they continue to offend me. How blind and foolish they are! Isn't the whole earth in my hands? Can I not open abysses in their regions and swallow them too? To show them this, I will cause earthquakes in other places where there are usually none. While he was saying this, he seemed to stretch out his hands towards the center of the earth, catch fire and approach it to the surface of the earth. Then the earth was shaken and earthquakes were felt, in some places more intensely than in others. He says, this is only the beginning of punishment, what will it be in the end? Having received Holy Communion, I wondered what to do to get even closer to the blessed Jesus. He said to me, to draw you even closer to me, to the point of melting your being into mine, as mine is melted into yours. You must in all things take what is of me and leave what is of you. If you get there, to think only of holy things, to look only at the good end, to seek only the glory and honor of God, you will leave your spirit and marry mine. If you speak and act only for good and out of love for God, you will leave your mouth and hands, replacing them with my mouth and hands. If you always walk holy and on straight paths, you will walk with my feet. If your heart loves only me, you will replace it with my heart to love only with my love, and so on for everything else. Thus, you will be enveloped in all my things and I in all yours. Can there be a closer union than that? If the soul reaches the point to no longer recognize itself, but recognizes only the divine being in her, these are the fruits of good communions and the divine purpose concerning them. Goal. How frustrated my love is and how small are the fruits that souls derive from communion. to the point that the majority remain indifferent and even disgusted with this divine food. I thought of my many privations and remembered that several years ago I had waited for our Lord for several hours. And, when He came, I complained that I had to struggle so much before He came. He told me, "My daughter, when I surprise you by coming without you waiting for me, then you are in debt with me. But, when I make you wait for a while and then I come, I am in debt with you. And do you think it's not much that a God is in debt to you?" So I thought to myself. At that time, it was hours, now it's days. Who could say how much debt He owes to me? I think they are countless, because He has abused these fantasies so much. Then I said to myself, and what is the good thing for me to have a God who is in debt with me? I think that being in debt with Him or that He is in debt with me is the same for Jesus, because, in an instant, He can give so much to the soul to equal and even surpass the debts he might have. Thus, all his debts are cancelled. While I was thinking like this, blessed Jesus said to me in my interior, "My daughter, you speak foolishly. Next to the spontaneous gifts I give to souls, there are the obligatory gifts. As for spontaneous gifts, I can make them or not make them, it is my choice, because I am not bound by anything. As for obligatory gifts, as is the case with you, I am obliged to give what the soul demands and add gifts. Imagine a gentleman and two people, one of whom leaves his money in the hands of the gentleman and the other does not. This gentleman can give to both people, but which one is the safest to get what she wants in case of need? The one who has money in the hands of the gentleman or the other who does not? It is obvious that the person who keeps his money in the hands of the gentleman is the one who has all the good dispositions, the courage, the confidence to go and ask the gentleman what he needs. Moreover, if she saw him hesitant to give what she asked, she could tell him frankly, "Hurry up and give me what I need. For what I ask of you does not belong to you, but is mine." On the other hand, if the one who has not deposited anything in the hands of the gentleman goes to him to ask him something, he will do so timidly, without confidence, and the gentleman will have the choice to help him or not. That's the difference between being in debt with someone or not being debt to someone. You can understand the immense advantages you have in having me as your debtor. While I was writing, I thought of another nonsense. When I am in heaven, my dear Jesus, you will feel irritated that you have accumulated so much debt to me. Whereas if you come now, since I will be in debt with you, you who are so good, from our first meeting, you will cancel all my debts. But I, who am bad, will not let things go and I will ask for payment even for the slightest moment of waiting. While I was thinking like this, He said to me inside me, "My daughter, I won't be irritated, but happy. Because my debts are debts of love and I desire much more to be in debt with you than the opposite. In fact, these debts that I will have with you will be pledges and treasures. That I will keep in my heart for eternity and that will give you the right to be loved more than others. It will be more joy and glory for me and you will be rewarded for even a sigh, a minute, a desire, a heartbeat. And the more eagerly and greedily you ask, the greater the pleasure you will give me, and the more I will give you. Are you happy now?" I was confused and didn't know what else to say. Being in my usual state, I thought to myself, what a useless life than mine. What good do I do? It's all over. No more participation in thorns, the cross, and nails. It's all really over. I feel a lot of suffering, even to the point of not being able to stir, but it is rheumatism, something completely natural. All I have left is the continual thought of His passion and the union of my will with His, offering Him what He has suffered and offering Him my whole being, as He wants and for whom He wants it. But, apart from that, nothing but my sad misery. So what is the purpose of my life? While I was thinking like this, blessed Jesus came like a lightning bolt and said to me, "My daughter, do you know who you are? Louisa of the Passion of the Tabernacle. When I share my sufferings with you, you are of Calvary. When I do not, you are of the Tabernacle." See how true this is. In the tabernacle, I show nothing on the outside, neither the cross nor the thorns. My self-immolation is the same as on Calvary. My prayers are the same. The offering of my life continues. My will does not change. I burn with thirst for the salvation of souls, etc. I can say that the things of my sacramental life and those of my mortal life are always the same. They have not diminished in any way, but everything is internal. Consequently, if your will is the same as when I share my sufferings with you, if your offering is the same, if your interior remains united to me and to my will, am I not right to say that? Are you Louisa of the Passion of the Tabernacle? The only difference is that when I make you share in my sufferings, you participate in my mortal life. I spare the world from greater scourges. When I do not make you participate in my sufferings, I chastise the world and you take part in my sacramental life. Nevertheless, this is my life in both cases. I was reading a book about various ways of behaving inwardly with Jesus and how he rewards the soul with an overabundance of graces and love. I compared what I was reading with what Jesus had taught me on this issue, which seemed to me like a vast sea compared to the small river of what I was reading in the book. And I said to myself, if this is true, who will be able to say how many graces my ever-kind Jesus pours into me and how much he loves me? While I was entertaining these thoughts and in my usual state, my good Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, you're not sure yet what it means to be chosen as a victim. As a victim, I contained within myself all the deeds of the creatures, their satisfactions, reparations, acts of worship, and thanksgiving. Thus, I was doing for each and every one what they should have done themselves. In the same way, as a victim, you must not compare yourself to others, but contain in you, not one person, but all people. And since you must act for all, I must therefore give you not the graces I give to one person, but enough graces to match those I give to all those considered together. Similarly, the love I give you must surpass the love I give to all people considered together. Because grace and love always go hand in hand. They have the same step, the same measure, and flow from the same will. Love attracts grace and grace attracts love, the two are inseparable. That's why you saw the vast sea that I have placed in you and the little rivers that I have placed in others. I felt confused when I compared all the graces I received to my great ingratitude and wickedness. Being in my usual state, I found myself out of my body. It seemed to me to see in purgatory a soul I knew. I said to him, "Tell me, what is my state before God? I'm so worried about it." She said to me, "It's very easy to know if your condition is good or bad. If you enjoy suffering, it is because you are in a good state. If you do not like suffering, it is because you are in a bad state. In fact, when we appreciate suffering, it is because we appreciate God. And, in appreciating God, one cannot displease Him. The things we appreciate, we value them, we cherish them and we protect them more than ourselves. Is it possible that someone wants harm for themselves? Thus, it is impossible that one can displease God if one appreciates Him." Afterwards, blessed Jesus came briefly and said to me, "My daughter, in almost everything that happens, creatures repeat incessantly, 'Why? What for? What for? Why this disease? Why this state of mind? Why this scourge?' And many other whys. The answers to these whys are not written on earth, but in heaven. There, everyone will read the answers. Do you know where these whys come from? Selfishness nourished by self-love. Do you know where these whys were created? In hell. Who was the first to pronounce the word why? A demon. The effects of the first why were the loss of innocence in the earthly paradise, the war of indomitable passions, the ruin of many souls and the miseries of life. The history of the why is long. It is enough to tell you that there are no evils in the world that do not bear the mark of the why. The why is the destruction of divine wisdom in souls. And do you know where the why will be buried? In hell, to return lost souls without rest for eternity, without them being able to find peace. The art of why is to wage war on souls without respite. To bring you even closer to me. To the point of melting your being in mine as mine is melted into yours. You must in all things take what is of me and you have to leave what is of you. If you get there, to think only of holy things, to look only at the good end, to seek only the glory and honor of God, you will leave your spirit and marry mine. If you speak and act only for good and out of love for God, you will leave your mouth and hands, replacing them with my mouth and hands. If you always walk holy and in straight paths, you will walk with my feet. If your heart loves only me, you will replace it with my heart to love only with my love, and so on for everything else. Thus, you will be enveloped in all my things and I in all yours. Can there be a closer union than that?